mean, we are probably at an interesting crossroads. There are two radically different trends out there. One trend is the fact that we were in a unipolar world where the US was preeminent after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We're not in that world anymore. That there is more distributive power in the world. And if we, if the world moves in the direction that most people would like to see it move, that is where poor countries tend to catch up, and so that they develop living standards that are closer to where rich countries are today. Well, in that case, those gaps between the poor and the rich countries would be smaller, and consequently, those gaps in power would also be smaller. And the US, which represents something like 5% of the world population, is not going to be the dominant player. So how do you live in a world where there are more people who feel empowered, autonomous, and so on? What's that equilibrium, right? And so that's one source of pressure. I like to say that people complain a lot about inequality, but a lot of the pressures on the world are consequences of increasing equality. That is, the fact that the poorer countries are catching up means that there's more competition in many industries that were, comfortably stable in rich countries, and so on. A second dimension is that there's been a tension between having sovereign policies and having common policies. That there's a benefit of having sovereign policies because then democracy can decide what you want, etc. But in a world that is interconnected, having a sovereign policy is like, having the right to build half a bridge. If your bridge connects with your neighbor and if he does not decide to make the bridge or she doesn't decide to make the bridge, you get half a bridge. And on half a bridge, you don't get half the traffic, you get zero. So there is a benefit of having common policies. And that's why you've seen so much pressure in the European Union, say, to want to become a bigger thing where, yes, we are going to abandon some of our sovereign policies, but in exchange for that, we're going to have the benefit of having policies that are more common. And so I think that's a second tension that's out there. And some people think, my colleague Danny Roderick thinks that the idea of common policies has gone too far, that we need to re-empower, that the balance between common policies and sovereign policies has moved too far in one direction. And so my sense is that the world is in flux. The current equilibrium is not likely to last. It's generating a lot of political tensions. But I hope, and there's one more thing. There's a lot of talk about trade and protection or whatever. But one of the things that is happening right now is that Julian is in Canada. Fabio, you are in Berlin. You're Italian. And I'm here in the US, I'm Venezuelan. And we're producing something, some output that is done in common, right? And we cannot imagine what is a world that would prohibit us from doing this, right? One of the things that happened with COVID is that we learned that we could do a lot of things from home. But anything that can be done from home can be done from abroad. So at least in terms of all of these things that are teleworkable, I think that the world is going to become more globalized. And I don't see an easy way for governments to prohibit that. And in any case, I don't see why they would. And I don't want to imagine what are the infringements on our individual liberties that would allow them to prohibit us from doing what we're doing right now. So in some sense, I think that the arrow of globalization is with us. There will be questions of how do you organize political systems given this integration of knowledge and information that characterizes the world. But I look at our current program and I look at the future with excitement. I don't find that as a dark, dangerous future. I hope we are able to manage the consequences in a way that makes that future more promising.
If I could just come in for a sec, there's a setback for physical globalization in some form, but digital globalization obviously is accelerated. So that you're talking about like the digital globalization. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
And
interesting.
expanding scope of digital globalization because it involves the globalization of tasks. It will re-engineer global value chains because many of the things that can be done from home will be done from anywhere in the planet, and that's going to, you have now these digital nomads that realize that they can work from anywhere, so why not from a national park, and so on. So I think these are trends that our institutions were not designed with those possibilities in mind, and they're bound to generate issues.